Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jungmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Junha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now July 3rd. It's a little bit before 4:30 p.m., and it's the first week of July. And, of course, we had a very big press briefing by the president today. And besides a press briefing, we've also had big diplomatic incidents. So, Jungmin, as usual, could you please kick us off?
Let's start with what happened first. The Chinese invitation to Lee Jae-myung to come to the Victory Day in September. Now, this is going to be a big test of Lee's diplomatic instinct.
Sure.
Big first test, right?
Yeah, the last time a South Korean president attended one of those events was 10 years ago when Park Geun-hye was president, and she attended the 70th anniversary of the Victory Day Parade. And
even when she was a conservative, it was still controversial, right?
It was controversial, but, like you just said, she was conservative. No one could accuse her of being, quote-unquote pro-Chinese. And at the time when she went to China, she had a legitimate excuse. They were trying something new. They wanted to get curry favor with China so that China would see the benefit of improved ties with South Korea and restrain North Korea. But, that was then.
And also different times.
Different times. This is now.
And there was no tariff, no Ukraine war, whatever.
No. And Lee Jae-myung has always been accused of being very soft on China. And he's a progressive, and he said nice things about North Korea. And so if he attends this, he's going to get a lot more criticism than Park Geun-hye ever got for her
Right.
trip.
So far, the presidential office's response to this is very diplomatic and very toned down. As far as we know so far, the presidential office confirmed that there was an invitation. That there is a diplomatic communications going on. It's usually their way of saying, sure, we were invited, but we will have to give it a bit of a thought, right? And there are multiple reasons for this. It's not just because of the domestic backlash potential, which is big, by the way. Lee has to take his time to see first who else is going to come to the Victory Day, because it could raise some eyebrows if he goes to the Victory Day, which is, by the way, a pretty significant symbolic day in China, not just yet another national day sort of optics, right? It's a military parade. So if Russia's going to be there or North Korea's going to be there, even if it's not a leader level or delegation, it's still going to draw some attention from Europe, NATO, so on and so forth.
Vladimir Putin has attended these events before.
Right, but last year North Korea declined the invitation or was not invited or something like that. Right?
I'm not quite sure if Kim Jong-un was invited or not, but I do remember that Vladimir Putin was there in 2015. Park Geun-hye was sitting right next to Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping throughout the entire thing. And everyone knows just how badly Russia needs to maintain good relations with China. And so it's very hard to imagine that China would not extend that invitation to Vladimir Putin, and for Vladimir Putin to say that he would not go.
I think that maybe Putin in the past mentioned that he is interested in going. This was way back. But so that is a possibility that Lee has to keep an eye on, like we has to keep an eye on, Ri Song-rak, the National Security Advisor, to actually calculate what the cost and benefit might be if the North Korean delegation side might be there. Even if it's not Kim Jong-un, they might want to consider a little bit, considering what's going on inter-Korea related overtures that Lee has been slightly making right now with, Trump rejecting the letter and Lee sort of going ahead with that might serve as a good, South Korean propaganda that it's doing its job. Sure, but
there's a time and place.
Yes, but so that's what I'm saying. There is a big cost with that, right? And when it comes to timing, I think domestically what's really important here is the tradition of a newly inaugurated South Korean president going to the United States as the first state visit, leader-level visit, because it's the sole ally that South Korea has. And even when it's Trump administration, people expect here that Lee will go visit U.S. first. So that's one thing. Another thing is in diplomatic courtesy, usually leaders take turn visiting each other country. And it has been very difficult to work around with Xi during the previous administration, even because she wouldn't come to South Korea. It was China's turn to come to South Korea, basically, and the foreign minister, I think, was trying very hard to make that happen, but it did not happen. And it was a major headline at the time. So if Lee visits without really firm confirmation of Xi actually coming to APEC, that's going to be in November. That's going to be a problem. So I think it's a matter of how to for the presidential office to frame the optic. They could say something like, "Oh, Xi is already confirmed to come to APEC, and it's a big day for them. So why not?" Go there, although it's in September. If they can frame it like
Still
that.
Still a risk.
Yeah, right. There is a risk. So if they frame it like that and there's no much public backlash, maybe.
I find it hard to imagine that there won't be a public backlash.
Yeah.
If Lee Jae-myung goes, he would be the third president in a row to visit China without having Xi Jinping reciprocate that.
Yeah.
Park Geun-hye went to China, Moon Jae-in went to China, and Yoon Suk-yeol did not go. And that's because they had that back and forth. It's reciprocity. It's time for you to visit. And Xi Jinping said, "No, you come to me." And so because of that pig-headed fight, that just visit never happened, either to China or to South Korea. But we all know just how salient and how perpetual this anti-Chinese sentiment here in this country can be.
Very strong.
But try to think from Lee Jae-myung's point of view, like in his shoes, doing the so-called pragmatic diplomacy thing. How do you think that he could potentially justify it, in his words?
I don't think that he can. Not when there is the U.S. visit that has yet to happen.
But pragmatic. Because the U.S. visit coming first, it's something that used to be a tradition, and he actually directly rejected the idea that it should stay as a tradition.
There's something that a president says in public and what he thinks in private. And yes, he says pragmatism, but as we've mentioned many times before, pragmatism can mean different things. But when the U.S. is just breathing down everyone's necks about trade and tariffs and any slight perception of slights against the United States is taken very personally. And especially when South Korea doesn't really have a lot of strong allies to fall back on at the moment, is this the right time for Lee Jae-myung to say, I'm going to be a bit more autonomous and daring in my foreign policy choices?
And so, gun to your head, if someone asks you, will he go to the Victory Day, what's your answer?
I say no.
Yes or no? No.
I say no either.
I say no as well.
That was a really intense debate.
Yes, let's revisit in September and see if we were all wrong. Let's move on to the next big topic, the first presidential formal press conference with both local media and foreign correspondents. And it was held not in the Yongsan presidential office, but the Blue House. We're back in Blue House. We use the big hall in the main building. And I was there this morning. And it was a 2 hours of a press conference, quite long. The president very apparently likes talking.
He's a talker.
And after any single question, he would talk for like 15 minutes. So good for the journalist to hear like actually him spelling out his logic for certain things.
Quite candid.
The downside was we could not ask that many questions, which was a little bit frustrating. But that was this morning. John, you and Geun-hye, you guys both monitored the entire press conference online as well. What were your main takes from like Lee's tone and manner, first of all?
Well, regardless of what one's personal opinion of the president and his policies may be, no one can deny that the man is extremely savvy.
Yeah, I agree.
He's a political beast. He's been mayor, he's been governor, he's now the president. He was the opposition leader for a long time. He knows exactly how to answer questions.
And handle reporters, right?
The one question that really stood out to me was a question about the 4.5-day work week. And yes, he did campaign on this. And he said that as president, he's going to work to make this a 4.5-day work week a reality by 2030. He didn't say immediately, but he said 2030.
That was during campaign.
During the campaign. And when they asked him this question again today, I really was struck by how he was firstly able to say very bluntly that this is a complex issue, that they cannot just unilaterally enforce this. This is something that will affect workers, trade unions, and also businesses as well. And eventually, the way that he framed this answer was that he turned it around and gave his own personal experience.
Yeah.
And
he turned it into a personal narrative.
Factory worker.
As a child factory worker, he was saying that when he was a child, there was no day off from work. It was 7 days, working 7 days a week. But then after some time had passed, they got half day off. Then it became a full day off, and then finally
There
2
was a
days off.
weekend.
Yeah, and so he framed his own personal story to talk about how his own personal journey shows that these kinds of advancements are slow and takes time.
Right. And like, agree or not with the take that he's giving, he knows how to go around the questions that reporter ask to not answer directly.
But the important thing is that it's not just about a personal anecdote. Is that by giving this kind of personal anecdotes, he doesn't answer the question. He doesn't say, yes, it will happen by a certain date. But what he does is that it makes it approachable for the typical citizen to hear and understand. But at the same time, by giving the kind of answer that he does, what the president does is that he puts himself at the center of it. He's, as George W. Bush would have said, he is the decider. And by making the kinds of statements that he did, he shifted the Overton window.
Yeah.
The idea is out there now. Now it's part of the political and cultural zeitgeist. Whether it happens by 2030 or next year or tomorrow, that no one knows.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an idea that's taking on a life of its own now.
Right. And it was very, very apparent that he is speaking to the public, not the journalists per se. Like, the theme itself of the press conference was journalists ask and the president answers to the public. So they framed it pretty strategically. And so whatever Lee Jae-myung was answering to, he was framing it being, something that he would say on live stream to the public rather than the journalists.
Sure.
So it was very... It looks like it was well executed from the presidential office staffer side. It looked like they put a lot of effort into it. I'm not saying all of that was like a good thing, but I could see that they are using these public platforms very strategically.
To communicate directly with the public.
Right. So it's in line with what the administration set out for, which is like 국민 주권 정부, people's sovereignty administration. So I think they are actually doubling down on that concept, and by using press conference platform, they are actually showing they are very serious about it. And Junho, what stood out to you? Tone and manner topic.
Sidelining with what you both have just said, I think his answer to the anti-discrimination law
that was underwhelming.
From the Yonhap reporter who was...
Good job, Yonhap, by the way.
Who asked one of the most pressing sort of domestic issues that's been continuing for recent years, coming after the PM's remarks in 2023 about how he was putting together Christianity and the anti-discrimination law as something to be debated.
He said that homosexuality will lead to human extinction or something.
Indeed.
Right?
And, when you put that into the perspective of Lee Jae-myung's answer, Lee Jae-myung's answer was, as you said, very underwhelming. He said that the current topic of the day being economy, political relations, that's the more pressing topic. And anti-discrimination law, although it has been a pressing topic in South Korea for many years now, should be sidelined. And he threw the ball to the National Assembly.
And I thought that was the most coward sort of answer that he gave today. Like, other answers, I think they were very diplomatic, but this one was not really strategically
he skipped
done.
away from the question, and he skipped away from the administration's responsibility to take the lead for an anti-discrimination law. But I think that overall, Lee Jae-myung's press conference performance, as you guys said, it was very candid. He was very good in politicking with the general public and the people who are watching live stream. So, I don't really see this as a minus for him in the near future.
With the anti-discrimination law question, it sort of felt like whataboutism a little bit. Like anti-discrimination law is important, the Yonhap reporter said. And he's like, but what about economy was his answer. So I hope he could shape up a little bit on responses like that next time. For me, being there in person, and I was there for Yoon administration press conferences over the past 3 years, and I was, I think, for the Moon administration one during the last year, I think. So I think optics-wise and logistics-wise, it's back to Moon era game plans when it comes to press conferences. And they do actually give a lot of opportunities for foreign press as well. But more hands-on approach than the Yoon administration. And for me, the interesting thing was lucky draw. Because in the past, the press freedom issue, and, you know, equal access to asking questions sort of, it always has been a problem during Moon and Yoon period, because when a spokesperson just ambiguously, arbitrarily pick a certain person, or
quote-unquote arbitrarily.
Quote-unquote arbitrary, or, you know,
the
a president
president
picks person. What happened during the Moon administration was that people would bring dolls and like wave it so that the president can see it. So I was thinking, should I bring like the 응원봉, the K-pop, the light stick thing? But I didn't do that. But the thing, it was actually very clever. They came up with 3 boxes where we could put our name cards into per different topic that we wanted to ask questions on, and it was random. So what happened was actually a lot of regional, like local newspapers got picked, and they asked a lot of regional development, like the balanced development sort of questions. So the downside of it was that a lot of wires and the main broadcasters and newspapers actually, like, none of them got the chance to ask questions. So if you're looking at the press conference headlines, and if you feel like the issues were too domestic, that's why. It's not because Lee actually actively chose to answer only those, but we really wanted to ask North Korea, more North Korea and Russia and Taiwan and whatever, Iran questions, but we just did not get lucky enough. And now let's move on to the next topic, K2 tank sales. Geun-hye.
Yeah, so South Korea, they landed what looks like a landmark deal, the largest ever deal in history, in South Korea's history, for the defense industry, with K2 Black Panther sales to Poland, about 180 tanks to Poland, about a $6.7 billion US deal, which is almost double the amount or the size of the deal that was done in 2022 with Poland. The good thing about this deal for Poland and for South Korea as well is sort of the interoperability of the defense manufacturing. So Poland will be, or Poland's PMZ will be undertaking around about 60 of the tank manufacturing, and South Korea will handle about 120 of the tanks that they will manufacture domestically. And it does look like the initial contract, which had fully assembled tanks from South Korea, in the new contract, it will be Polish production as well.
The K2PLs.
Yeah. So it still is a surge from Poland's continued trajectory in sort of combating the Russian war in Ukraine, and sort of the threat level that Russia poses towards the Polish border as well. So it's something that will continue, but it's a big win for South Korea and also a big win for Poland.
Look, I got a question about all of these arms sales. Now, great. The more that Hyundai can sell these K2 tanks, the more money they make, and that's great and everything. But a consistent criticism that we've always been hearing about these arms sales is that it comes at the expense of cannibalizing South Korea's own needs. South Korea also needs additional K2 tanks as well. But the more South Korea sells these K2s to Poland, the longer the South Korean military has to wait for new tanks, doesn't it?
So that's a devil's advocate question. Geun-hye, do we actually need them right now?
Well, I think that it's half-half. So K2 tanks at the moment, the current artillery brigades and also the movement brigades that are in the front line, they have quite a good share of K2 tanks. Of course, the technology needs to be updated. But whether or not we need a new scrap hold of K2 tanks to come in, I think it's just a matter of updating the defense technology instead of getting a new rollout. I think that the current system is working as planned. Of course, it should not continue at the way it is, but I think that South Korean defense industry is going for the greater good right now.
And just to touch on what you mentioned briefly, interoperability. That's actually really important if South Korea wants to make a point to NATO countries that South Korean weapons are actually worth buying.
But has interoperability ever been an issue for South Korea? South Korea's been allies with the United States for decades, and NATO countries have already made their weapons in sync with U.S. weapons as well.
Yeah,
Should this be something that South Korea needs to prove itself over and over again?
Not really. Like, it hasn't been an issue, but it was not actively exported for active war before.
Now, I thought it was only because at the time South Korean goods were not needed. This was a pre-Russia invasion, and the Europeans were quite happy with the stockpiles that they had. But now that the situation in Europe has changed, now they're buying South Korean weapons. And so interoperability has always been there. It's just not something that South Korea has needed to prove, at least not to the Western alliance.
Just to add on to that, I mean, South Korea's NATO-class weapons. South Korea's weapons are NATO-class, being manufactured in line with U.S. standard. But South Korea's current defense industry's trajectory is quite new. So 2020, 2021, 2022, that's when we saw the sort of rise of South Korean weapons going into Eastern Europe. It still hasn't gone and extended all the way into Western Europe because of French and German
Good luck trying to defeat
manufacturers.
Rheinmetall.
Oh,
Exactly. And you've got the Leopard tanks as well that are being, sailed all the way around Finland. So it's something that the South Korean defense industry is still wrapping their heads around on how to overcome it. But the defense industry is still on a trajectory for the foreseeable future.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast-evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead. I'll start with something that was supposed to be a week ahead, but that's probably not happening. The presidential office confirmed today that Marco Rubio, who was supposed to visit South Korea next week from July 8th to 9th, is not coming anymore.
Boo that man.
It's unclear. It's unclear why he's still going to Malaysia. It seems this part is reported.
Malaysia is the chair of ASEAN, and so that makes sense.
So he's going to that main event, but he's not doing the sideline visit to South Korea. It seems.
Doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
Presidential office said that they're open to the Secretary of State visiting Seoul or having sideline talks with South Korea during ASEAN, but it doesn't look like a possibility for the foreseeable future.
Maybe they're too busy trying to deport American citizens to El Salvador.
When they have J.D. Vance memes on their phones.
Wonderful.
And also, Commercial Act also passed the National Assembly. This one, PPP did not boycott, but they ended up succeeding in negotiation point, right? John, can you just briefly mention that?
Okay, so commercial law, just to give you guys the quick version of it, what happened is that the big thing, directors are no longer beholden just to the company, they're also beholden to shareholders, including minor shareholders. And the big thing is also the 3% rule. Now, in the past, whenever directors had to hire outside auditors, the CEO or the people with the largest shares could vote for whoever they wanted because they had the lion's share. But now, regardless of how much your majority shares are, even if you are the majority shareholder, your vote will not exceed that 3%. And so this is going to make it a lot more democratic. And so the PPP did not like this law at all. In fact, the last acting president, or the one before, Han Duck-soo, he vetoed this bill when it came to him in April. And now, a month after Lee Jae-myung came to office, the bill passed in the National Assembly. He's going to sign it. But the PPP said, we had no choice but to take part in this negotiation because this is what the PPP spokesperson said. The Democratic Party was passing a bill that was so anti-business that the PPP had no choice but to take part in it. Now,
What's your take?
I don't know just how much input that they actually had. At this point, they don't really need to be there for bills to pass. I think this is really just as a gesture of goodwill, which I don't know why the Democratic Party even bothered to show, because they don't need to at this point. But yeah, essentially the Democratic Party threw the PPP a bone, and they ate the bone, and they said, yummy, but pui.
Quote him, please, by the way. And this is in line with, this actually has a very long history, just theoretically, like when it comes to general direction of this is actually in line with what Kim Jong-un had advised Park Geun-hye in the past about economic democracy, right? And I guess part of it is actually coming to life now. Anything else next week?
Yeah, so the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Chairman of South Korea, Admiral Kim Myung-soo, and also the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman for the United States, General Dan Kane, and the Japanese counterpart Yoshida will meet in Seoul sometime next week for a 2-day trilateral Chiefs of Defense gathering. This also comes amid sort of USFK regional development on where they'll be stationed, considering the Washington Post reports that Seoul and Washington have denied. Trade Minister Yohan Gu will also be in Washington this weekend, reportedly to meet with the U.S. Trade Representative Greer, Howard Lutnick, and other U.S. officials to try and steer South Korea forward in the current lagging trade talks that are going on, with the deadline creeping up on the 8th.
Which is as erratic as ever.
Indeed. And special probes for insurrection, the presidential office's suspected involvement in dealing with the death of the Marine in July 2024, and the First Lady, they're in full swing with the Yoon era cabinet ministers, including the former head of the cabinet and former acting president Han Duck-soo being called in for questioning into the office, and also an imposition of a travel ban for former First Lady Kim Geun-hye. So these proceedings will continue.
And all of this information will be sent to your email inboxes by Monday via the Week Ahead newsletter. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Have a good weekend, everyone.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead.